Hey, this is James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting June the 15th, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. First, before getting into this week's reading, I want to acknowledge those of you who took some time to check in with me over the course of last week. Last week, I did not post a video reading, and a number of you checked in to make sure that I was okay, so I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for checking in on me. It meant the world to me. So now, the reason why I didn't post a video, in case you were wondering, I don't mind sharing, is that I am in a space where I just have a lot going on. I'm working 2 jobs, I'm running my business part-time, and there are just only so many hours in the day, and I tend to be the type of person, and maybe you can relate to this, or at least some of you, that likes to have a full list of things to do and thrives on being busy, but at some point I realized that Rome wasn't built in a day, and I only have so many hours in a day to get certain things accomplished. So over the course of the week, I just realized that the video just wasn't going to happen, and so I had to give myself permission to take the week off. So I did that. Right? I gave myself permission to take the week off. And so now I'm back, and hopefully I will continue to create balance in my life, because that's what this is really telling me. That's the lesson in this, right? So saying I need balance, right? And I'm just in this space of just all these things that are going on because they still have to get done, right? So it's an opportunity for me to learn how to get creative with my scheduling in a way to make everything still work, right? So that's where I'm at. Full disclosure, I don't mind sharing that. So hopefully the weekly readings will continue to go on without any bumps in the road. But, you know, life being what it is, you just never know, right? Okay, so I just wanted to share that. Oh, and in the course of the week, so this is another thing that I added to my plate as if I didn't have enough going on. I was inspired to create my second deck. So I'm in the process of working on another deck. I still haven't really finished the first deck, the Oracle of Himm, for those of you who've been following that. So I'm in the process of working with the deck and writing up the, I guess, the guidebook or the companion book. So I'm in that space with that, and I'm having a wonderful time playing with the cards. And then I was inspired to create a second deck. So I've been spending time looking for imagery and working on those cards. So I'll talk more about that. I will give you this little teaser. So the first deck, the Oracle of Himm, is really about my personal spiritual growth and development and aspects of that. And this deck is more reflective of the work that I do as an intuitive coach. So I'm excited about that. So this might be the deck that I would consider to be maybe more commercial. If I was to sell it, it would be more commercial because it's more about the work that I do. So I'm very excited about it. If you happen to follow me and you check out my community tab on my channel page, you will see cards every now and again pop up. I've already posted 2. So, you know, that's a nice way to kind of maybe see the progress of the deck, you know, when I share those cards. But I will probably share them in that space until, you know, the deck is done and I do a walkthrough like I did with the first deck. But that was another thing that happened over the course of the week, and so that kind of like revs me up. It's very interesting to see the inspirations or the motivations in terms of the deck creation for myself and what's going on in the collective, right? So there's interesting things that are going on now that may have played a role in the inspiration for the deck. And then 3 months prior, it was like 3 months to the day actually, right? It was March the 11th for the inspiration for Oracle of Himm, and it was June the 11th this week for the inspiration of this deck. 3 months apart to the day. So there's something about the number 11 on the calendar. And there's one person out there who's proficient with numbers. So Cheryl, if you're watching, think about that. The 11th for both decks. Okay? All right. So, but anyway, so that is where I've been at with deck creation on both decks. And so Speaking of decks, now let's get to the deck that I'm going to use this week. So I've been continuing to get requests for working with Kipper. There's a contingent of you out there who loves Kipper, and I'm just glad to hear it. So this week, I wanted to work with a deck that gets a lot of positive response in this space when I use it, and that is Rupa Dudley's Kipper Carton. And so the deck is, of course, by Rupa Dudley, and I will be leaving information about the deck in the description box below. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and see what Rupa Dudley's Kipper Carton wants to share with us about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table. I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And I'm shuffling in my usual intention for these readings, and that is for the information, for any guidance or advice, any information that's going to be helpful and beneficial to come through the cards regarding the upcoming week. Ooh, so I'm feeling one more time will be good. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And fan the cards out. And now I'm picking 5 that are getting my attention. So I have my 5 cards. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up. I'm going to move that to one side. Now I'm going to lay the cards out in the way that they were drawn, starting with the card on the right, because that was 5, 4, 3, 2, and this was the first card. And if you're new to my channel, my preferred way of reading certain systems like Kipper is that I like doing a line of 5. So that's what this is. And with Kipper, the line gets read from left to right, because Kipper is a system that's heavily influenced by direction, and it has certain cards that are read in certain ways, depending on the directional cues. So I always start off with the card on the far left and work my way across. So starting with the card on the left, opening the line up. This week we have a long way. So for me, this card usually can represent a journey, and it usually represents a journey that takes time. This is known for me as time and distance. So the first thing that I always say when I get this card in the first spot is that this card can be talking about the road that we're on. So that could be literal in some cases and metaphorical more often than not. And so this card usually talks about either something that's a ways down the road, or something that is going to take some time to develop or reach. If we go with the idea that the road is metaphorical and we're reaching a destination, it would suggest taking some time to get there. It can also be a card that talks about progress, right? So something that's been a long time coming, or suggesting that in terms of progress, you've come a long way, right? So there's 2 ways of looking at this card. If we look at it from the lens of the past, then it could just be taking a look at where you are now in relation to where you used to be, and noting the progress between the 2 points, right? The 2 destination points, right? So there's that. But it could also be like you've been waiting for something to happen, and it's been a long time coming. Like, so now you're in a space where you're seeing the fruits of your labors, so to speak, or you're reaping the rewards of some seed that you planted many, many moons ago. And I'm saying that because there's a moon on the card, right? When Rupa designed this card, I believe, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, that the idea of this card is to the moon and back, right? So that would tell you based on that phrase, some distance, right? It could also be, since I'm saying that out loud, it could be like a situation in which you feel like it's come full circle, right? So now, in light of what's been going on in the collective, this card might suggest that in some respects that the collective has made progress, and in other respects we still have a long way to go. So I'm going to leave it at that, and that is a long way. All right, so now let's take a look at the next card. Next to a long way we have the caretaker card. So in traditional Kipper cartomancy, this is known as good lady. So this card usually represents an older woman. So the way I always language this when I'm doing Kipper readings for the collective is that the caretaker card will represent an older woman. So this could be a woman who's older than all of us who are experiencing this video at the same time. So she can represent a mother figure. The word matriarch is coming to mind. She can represent an older sister. She can represent an aunt, grandmother, any type of woman who is older than us, right? So there's that to consider. She can also be a woman who's going to be helpful in the situation. So if we're talking about a long way in terms of progress, something that's been a long time coming, it may involve for some of us an older woman. Now, it could also be that a woman who's older than us, that we may have some sort of relationship with, figures prominently into this because it may be something that is affecting her directly, right? So it could be that the caretaker figure here is the one who's experiencing this progress being made, right? Or the anticipation of some progress, or that she's come a long way in some regard. And it could be, as I'm saying that, it could be that she's come a long way in terms of making progress in the relationship that you're having with her. And so the only way that I can clarify that would be what's being shown to me is like a mother-child relationship, and that the mother has made some great strides in the way that she relates to you. And I'm saying that to you as an adult, right? I'm seeing, in my mind, I'm seeing my relationship with my mother to some degree to get me to say that, right? So it makes me feel like for some people watching this video that you are going to be noting some strides in your relationship with your mother because she has come a long way in how she relates with you, or how she sees you, or how she experiences you, right? So there's that. Now, for other people, it could be the opposite, because this card would suggest that because she's not facing a long way, is that something that she struggles with. So for some people, there's going to be a challenge in that regard, right? That you've been hanging in there with this relationship with this older woman for some time, and you may not be seeing the progress that you would like to see, right? And then this card would suggest, or the pair of cards would suggest, that maybe consider giving it a little more time. Because I'm hearing this song in my head, give me just a little more time. So it could be like you may want to think about giving that situation a little more time. But now also keep in mind that you get to decide how much more time you want to give it, right? So there's that. Now, the only other thing I will say about this card is I'm looking at the symbolism of a crown above the woman's head. And there's a picture in the background, and it has a crown on it, right? So this can usually represent a woman who has some position of authority, right? So again, that could go back to a mother or maternal type figure, or it could be that you're in a situation with a woman who holds some position of authority. So this could be a working related situation, and there may be a woman who holds a position of authority that you're having to deal with, right? And it could be like, how can you make progress? Or maybe the issue is about progress being made in that working relationship, or that working situation, right? And it could be that you may see some fruits of your labors, pun intended, in that regard. So again, caretaker can represent a woman who's older than us. Could also be a woman who is in some position of authority, right? It could also be a woman who wants to be helpful in the situation. So it would be very interesting to see what card is next to her in the middle, because usually surrounding cards, if they're positive in nature, would suggest that she's more helpful. And if they're challenging, would suggest that she's not as helpful as she could be. Right? So there is that. Oh, the only other thing I will say about caretaker is that she can also represent a woman who has some level of experience, right? So if you're going through a particular situation, caretaker in this regard could represent a woman who has some experience with what you're going through and may be able to assist you with the progress that you want to make in the situation. I'm being led to say the idea of like someone who's been there, done that, right? Because I'm seeing that expression, right? Without wearing the t-shirt, but someone who's been there and done that, right? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the card in the middle. Oh, one of my favorite cards in the deck. And so this is an extra card. This is the fortune teller card. So when the fortune teller card comes up, it can usually represent being centered on one's intuition. I tend to look at it as an intuitive card, right? So there may be something about being in touch with your intuition that would make sense too with caretaker. Caretaker is feminine energy, and right, so our intuition is really more about our feelings. It's our feeling nature, how we intuit information, so there may be something about that. Now, interestingly enough about the fortune teller, behind her, she has tarot spelled out. You can't quite see it clearly, but it's a nod to the Wheel of Fortune from tarot. So for me, when I get this playing on the idea of fortune, there may be something about, being at a major turning point in life, right? And so if we go back to the very first card where we talk about progress, it could be saying for the collective that we are at a major turning point, right? And this is an opportunity, because that's another meaning for the Wheel of Fortune for me, in terms of going forward, right? So again, it's a major turning point, but it can also represent emotional ups and downs, being on an emotional roller coaster, needing to take a chance on something. So it could be a chance with other people, caretaker, or it could be taking a chance on yourself, because I'm hearing the ABBA song. Yes, I went there, I dated myself. The ABBA song, Take a Chance on Me, right? So it could be that you are expressing to another person to take a chance on you in a relationship with that person, or that you're having self-talk and it's about you taking a chance on yourself, right? Now, the other thing about the Wheel of Fortune would be, is the gamble worth the risk involved? Because the Wheel of Fortune can be a pun for gambling, but also about a risk, right? So the question here is, would you be willing to take the risk? Is the risk worth it, right? And so you may want to think about that if you're not as risk averse as some other people, right? So there may be something about some level of risk, and you have to ask yourself, am I willing to take the risk, or I'm willing to take the chance or chances, right? So that's one aspect of the fortune teller, besides the obvious of being a fortune teller, right? And then she holds the moon card. So the moon card is a nod in tarot again about one's intuition, one's psychic development, but it can also be a card that talks about confusion, uncertainty, bewilderment, right? And if we go with what's going on in the collective in the larger sense, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Going on, right? And it may be like people are trying to make sense of maybe something that can't be explained, right? Trying to make sense of something that's confusing to them, but there's no logical or rational explanation for it, right? So it could just be about moving through a period of uncertainty, but it can also be something that is triggering our emotions. The moon card can come up in two ways. One where our sensitivity is being heightened, and in some regards that's true for the collective, right? But it can also be about being confronted with our fears, and usually the moon talks about our subconscious and unconscious fears. So there may be something on a subconscious level or an unconscious level that's coming up to the surface. and it's coming up so we can see it, confront it, and heal it. So that's my riff on the Wheel of Fortune in the background and the moon card being held by the fortune teller in the foreground, right? But if you are maybe on a personal level getting involved in a situation which there is some level of risk or some level of chance involved, then the fortune teller is saying to you that you might want to think about playing your hunches or trusting your gut. Those are all semantics for going with your intuition, right? If the idea of intuition is too woo-woo and you use those expressions, it's the same thing. It's just said in a different way, right? So that's my riff on the fortune teller. Again, that is one of my favorite cards in the deck. So now as I'm saying that, I'm about to move on. The fact that the fortune teller is a person who reads cards or makes predictions could be, if we go with the reading cards thing, it could be that some of you are being encouraged to either take your card reading practice to the next stage or level. That would be Wheel of Fortune, right? Kind of upping your game, right? Or that we need to pay attention to maybe some predictions that are being made either in the metaphysical circles, meaning like psychics and fortune tellers who are making predictions about what may be coming up, or that there are predictions being made in the collective based on current events. And we may need to give some credence to those predictions being made, right? So that's what I want to say about fortune teller. Okay. So now let's move on to the next card. And here we have there's a pun here. We have fortune teller in the middle, and then we have great fortune following that. So great fortune is the best card in the deck. It usually represents abundance. It usually represents blessings, great happiness. That's another name for this card. And this is said to be representative of Fortuna, right? But this card represents a shower of abundance, a shower of blessings. So what I love about it, following my riff on the fortune teller and how I started that, was the background of the Wheel of Fortune. This could represent a change in one's fortunes, right? So now it could be twofold. It could be a change in fortune regarding your relationship with an older woman, or that there's an older woman who's going to experience a change in her fortune, right? Because the Wheel of Fortune in that sense can represent, like I said, a major turning point. But in this regard, it can represent a turnaround, a change for the better, those kinds of things. The Wheel of Fortune also represents evolution, expansion, that kind of energy. So this is great. I love seeing these two cards back to back. And Great Fortune is so positive, being the best card in the deck. It usually outshines any challenging or negative cards. Luckily for us this week, there aren't any challenging cards, so to speak, yet. But I just think that if I was to look at this and make this a message about the collective, that we are embarking on a major turning point as a whole. And I think one of the emphasis with Caretaker is on how are we treating each other? Are we taking care of each other? You know, one human being to another? Is there a way that we can do that better? If we're taking a look at the progress that's been made, but understanding that we still have some ways to go and some progress still needs to be made. You know, I can't help but notice that 3 of the cards have women depicted on them. So it could be, is there something about the way that we treat women, specifically because of the gender depiction on the cards? Or is that something about getting more in touch with our feminine nature, which would be our feelings? You know, and the first thought that's coming to my mind is about empathy. Is there a possibility that we may be able to display or demonstrate more empathy? How can we be more empathetic with other people this week? That's the message that's coming to me, so I'm just going to go with that. You know, I'm looking at Great Fortune, and I get a lot of music running through my head, and so right now I'm looking at that card and I'm hearing the song Shower the People. So if those of you who are mature enough to know the musical reference, there's something about how can we shower people with more good. Okay, so that is good fortune. So good fortune, remember, is about blessings, abundance, great happiness, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at the last card, rounding out the line for this week. And here we have social media. Okay, so there is a pun here because I just talked about other people, and here we have the social media card. So the first thing that I will say is that there may be some predictions being made about our fortunes on social media, right? And for some people, it may be, because I'm looking at the chess piece under glass, some people may want to choose the option of unplugging from social media if they can, based on information that's being shared on social media. I'm looking at the background, and the background for me makes me think of things that are toxic, right? So it could be a matter of just unplugging from some of the quote unquote toxicity that exists on social media. If you want to be in a place of being happier, possibly about where you are in life right now, than maybe if you were to continue to stay plugged in, right? Or then you have the option to maybe search out some better places to hang out on social media, right? But now I'm going to separate the two words on this card because just like fortune teller, this is an extra card in the deck. So I'm going to go with the media first. So this could just be a nod about the media in general. So if I go with that, it's about what are you tuning into? You know, what messages are you watching, listening to that are being broadcasted or played? You know, and if that's the case, then you have to pay attention to that. And if you're not liking what you're seeing or hearing, then what would you be willing to do differently? Would you be willing to watch something differently or listen to something differently? Maybe something a little more positive in nature? If you're thinking that the world's going to hell in a handbasket, that's the words that are coming to me because they're showing me. So sometimes when I watch the news, and so I'm going to go with the news first. So sometimes when I watch the news, I sometimes walk away from the TV thinking that the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And so you may be in that place. And if you are, I want to offer this just based on my own experience. So it's no secret that I'm an angel person. So one day, through an angel card that I drew, the angel shared with me that for every piece of negative news that I'm hearing, there are countless other things that are wonderful going on in the world that I will never hear about because the media is slanted to only share or highlight or perpetuate the things that are challenging in the world or the things that are not working in the world because that's what it does, right? It runs on that. So keep that in mind. So if you're feeling or believing that there's nothing right in the world, you might want to change the sources that you are getting your content from. So it's all a matter, it's just really a matter of balance. Okay? So that's the media part. So I'm going to get off my soapbox about that. So now let's switch to the other word, social, right? Again, that just talks about other people in the collective. So again, coming right after, or right after, I should say, yes, great fortune, it could be a matter of how can we display goodwill or even better will towards people, right? If you're feeling like there are injustices in the world about how people are being treated, and you're also feeling like, I don't know what I can do about that, start treating the people around you, closest to you, maybe just a little bit better. Maybe be willing to listen to a person that maybe you have not listened to before in a different way, right? If we go back to the caretaker card and maybe about caring and nurturing of other people, how can we display that more and more? But it starts in our own social circles before we can branch out in a bigger way, right? So again, ending on social media, I just think that Number one is about social media in and of itself. And so maybe taking a look at where you are getting your information online, and maybe consider making a change in outlooks, or outlets rather. And that would change, maybe make a change in your outlook, right? If you change outlets, right? So do that, but maybe just take a look at what you are tuned into. It may be an opportunity for you to look at maybe certain conditioning and programming and maybe freeing yourself up from that. It could be a matter of like maybe you believe those things to be true at some point, and maybe you're wanting to move beyond that because you realize that it's unhealthy, right? And then the idea here about being social could be about how can we engage with others maybe in a more thoughtful and empathetic manner. And so on that note, I'm going to end this week's Oracle Outlook reading here. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I wrap up, I'd like to thank you for sharing this space here with me for this week's video reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I am hoping that you have the best day possible, and I'm hoping that you have the best week possible. Take care.